Hello and welcome everybody, I'm One Bavarian, and today we got something juicy because we get to talk about Victoria 3's 2026, at least as far as free updates are concerned. This neat graphic right here was provided by the development team, no other screenshots, so in this video it's just me yapping and this graphic itself. And essentially what they're showing here are the major goals that they have for the game in 2026. We are used to these kind of graphics already in the past, and I think they have been very informative of where the game wants to go and then indeed what was achieved. You can see up in the top right, indeed, planned, updated, and done, with all of these currently only being planned. I can already tell you before we jump into this, I think they are running into really amazing topics right here. I'm very excited for what they are doing, and I think, especially when I talk with the community and so on, that they are hitting on the head a whole bunch of issues that virtually everybody has and that need to be addressed. All of these look really promising. I think the goals show that the team is going into a direction that makes a lot of sense and that will unequivocally make Victoria 3 a better game if executed well. Now, I do want to stress here, in the last year, Victoria 3 has been incredibly stable in the way that they push out patches and DLCs, and the quality of both of those. I hope that they can keep this, but obviously, well, you never know how it really goes. Right now, I am confident that most of these should end up as done, rather than just as updated in 2026. But without further ado, let's just jump straight into this. I will be giving you what it is, what I think about it, and what I think the community discourse about this has been. Let's start with the military, the never-ending topic really for Victoria 3, and I think ultimately deservedly so. As much as I'm very happy that we're not just moving around stacks, the reality is that this isn't really perfect. Nowhere near perfect. It has been incredibly troubled, it has been incredibly frustrating, and it can really only get better. Currently, we are looking at something that already is better than at launch, but that when it isn't frustrating, also isn't particularly fun. In particular, for me personally, because I read up on it a lot, and I actually did a video on it detailing what I think should be done. Topic of the Navy. Now, the first point that they have is make generals and admirals into more meaningful and noticeable actors in countries and reduce the micromanagement of large numbers of commanders. I gotta be honest with you, that is obviously a thing that everybody has noticed. The prevailing opinion, in my observation anyway, when it comes to the community and this topic, is to just give you a button to automate it, which, yeah, that is fine, but I have ever since, basically, I think launch ultimately, argued for a military academy. I would like a system where, yes, these commanders are automatically generated and assigned to the armies in which they need to be, but also additionally they are actually coming as the product of a military academy. In the broad strokes, I think the way that I would envision this, which would be much better than just automating it, although if they just automate it, I mean, I don't know why it would be in this list, but who knows? I would love a military academy that you have to found. It, of course, wasn't standard everywhere in the world. Before this, it was largely hereditary. You had a class of people that lead armies, and that is basically it. After that, you run into a situation where you have a military academy that has certain goals, that develops theories, and because of this, produces certain people, both in their societal standing, so are they aristocratic, are they bourgeois, are they proletarian, but also in their actual thinking, politically and militarily. So if you have a very cautious military, this military academy would largely give you people that are cautious. If you have one that is aggressive, like the French, for example, in 1914, Elan, whoever attacks should also always win, well, then that is the type of commander that you get. If you want to change it, you have to politically meddle with it. Maybe it can even be influenced by outside observers, you could even work with slots related to who is educating at these military academies, that kind of thing. So you can invite, for example, an advisor that is German to Japan, and then he builds up the military academy in Japan until the Japanese themselves take it over. The more you politically meddle with it, the more loyal would the armed forces be, the more would they be tied to the state and not prone to revolution. But additionally, if you meddle, it might make it so that, well, we are putting people first that are loyal rather than good at military matters. I would really like this. I think that would be amazing. I can't really envision many other ways of doing this that wouldn't later on still need a military academy, but we're gonna see whether they will be doing this or not. Right now it is bothersome, and it also makes it so that you can easily manipulate, of course, how impactful certain interest groups are just by leaving all your armies empty. The way it is right now is not just annoying because of certain exploits, but also because it makes it so that essentially you sit down, you start a war, and then you realize, oh, all of my armies are at no organization because I forgot to reassign commanders. Currently, it sucks. It can only get better. I would love it. I think it would be the non plus ultra for me if we got an actual military academy system. Now, next up we have make sure that supply is an important and meaningful part of the military system that can win or lose your wars. This supply right now, as it works, is something that I've explored in depth and when just playing basically, and I have to say it is deeply unsatisfying because even in its best cases, you just get a very limited effect on your troops. It's not really that significant, and dealing with it is very opaque. It's not clear, it's not easy, and the reward is basically never worth it. At most, people try to disrupt supply lines because they want to crash your entire trade, rather than a particular army, because doing it to your army just doesn't really do much. If you want to have a functioning navy, where it's not just about global domination like it was for the British or is today for the United States of America, you need something that makes this much more impactful for your armies, right? This is very important because once it matters for your armies, you don't need to have a global navy. All you need is a navy that can be active in front of your coastline to intercept whatever would come in. This is vital. I think that there can be some inspiration from Hearts of Iron 4. I think Hearts of Iron 4 does a lot of things really well, although you can't really translate too much, and I know what you're saying. You're saying they should just do the unit system of Hearts of Iron 4 and Victoria 3. That would be so computation heavy, it would take so many reworks. I'm just going to be realistic with you. I would love to see that game, don't get me wrong. I don't think it is doable with the way things currently are when it comes to, well, the way this game works and the way every game works. So for right now, I would simply take a system that makes it much clearer, much less opaque, what I need to do to interrupt supply, and then has this supply actually matter. It should also be said that in the very early period of Victoria 3, you actually have a lot of ad hoc supply. That means that you don't have a planned system where, hey, I'm gonna go on an expedition, oh, okay, right, we have to set up these convoys. That didn't exist. Convoys and all of that kind of stuff was done very ad hoc. If you were a commander in, somewhere in the periphery fighting against an enemy that isn't really that important to England, all they would say is, well, you can procure whatever you need in a local situation, and we're gonna, deal with it in the treasury and later after the fact. Which means that supply can also be a localized issue. If they could implement that as well, I would be a big fan, but honestly, fundamentally, just make it matter and make it interesting and fun to interrupt. Now the next one, I mean, what can I say? All of these three next ones basically are something that I really want and have wanted for a long time. I made, again, a video about it, and let's just take a look at it. Make navies more important for projecting global power and securing control of coasts. Okay, that's very important. Maybe we can do something there with trade routes, with market areas, right? So like, how does this kind of get control of the market? Is there market access related to it? Maybe we could look into piracy. It was technically outlawed by an international treaty, but there was still some piracy, and this was a big part of power politics. But also fundamentally, of course, you can't really exert a lot of power if you don't have a navy, on average, all the time stationed in a particular area. Getting knowledge of those, of the region that you're active in, and most importantly, constantly showing presence, is a big part of maintaining and building a big empire. Currently, that's just not the case. The British Navy can be as efficient in the home counties as it can be somewhere in the Pacific. If that were to change, if we deal with coaling stations, for example, if we say we need international treaties and give some leverage maybe to even small nations, because now all of a sudden they're much more attractive, they can get some investment rights and whatnot because they can offer coaling stations, I think that would be nice. Securing certain ports all around Africa would also, of course, play a big role here. Now, I will be cautious. I do not expect anything related to a colonization rework here, even though this would fall into the very same periphery. I don't think that they could... Listen, surprise me, okay? If they can get that done, I'm a big fan, but I don't see it. So from where I'm standing, all I really would like is stuff like coaling stations. Maybe we are also looking at more use cases for the Navy, like, for example, mapping certain regions, staking political claims, making sure that you find out where good harbors are in Africa and so on. All of that stuff I think would be phenomenal. I would genuinely be in love with that. After that, we have turned individual ships into proper pieces of military hardware that can be built, sunk, and repaired rather than just being manpower packages. Right now, the Navy is effectively the army. What I mean there is that it has the same underlying systems, the fundamental way that you have it, that you build it, is exactly the same, and all of that makes zero sense for the Navy. For example, you mostly don't pay anything until you actually have all your ships staffed, because you have to staff the building. That's not how it works. Building a ship is a long-term investment. You have to put so much money into that. Not to mention, of course, that having these ships and, for example, making sure that your navy is bigger than that of the two next naval powers, which is British policy, by the way, or used to be British policy anyway, it is incredibly important. And you can't do this unless you have actual ships in your game. I hate that they haven't been in the game until now. Again, that video has everything in there that you need to know. I read Mahan for that, yeah? They made me read, okay? I think there's very little that they can do worse than it currently is. And this has infinite potential. We're talking about, for example, letting your navy be built in foreign ports, in foreign construction sites, right? About selling ships, about making sure that you can actually supply your navy, that you can build your navy, and then have it actually protecting your interests. And if it sinks, it's going to take ages to rebuild, or at least a few years, because you actually lost the ship, not just the manpower. All of this stuff is so important. I don't really want to go into depth here, because even if I risk that you get annoyed because I keep repeating it, I genuinely think that I made an amazing case for how I think this should be working in the video that, you know, is linked in the description. So from my standing here, I hope that they take from that video. I can tell you right now, I know that they've seen that video. The Victoria 3 dev team is incredibly active in the community. They read all discussions, they watch all videos. They are addicts, quite frankly, to the community. Yeah, I can only really say I hope that it is at least as good as I envision it in my video. After that, we have improve naval combat and make it mechanically distinct from land combat. I would actually love something like Hoi 4. I can't say that I understand Hoi 4 naval combat, but the way that it depicts things and the way that the range of certain, ships actually matters, I think that sounds cool. I think I would love to see that here in this game. So yeah, hey, if they got that to offer, then I wouldn't say no to it. I think all of these make a lot of sense, and they also very clearly hint what, in my opinion, will probably be the major expansion that we will be getting in probably 2, I would guess. They say later in this dev diary actually that they are going to be back with dev diaries in early spring, so we're looking at, March, I would guess, and then we can take a look at what is coming our way. But my guess here is that we are looking at the major expansion focused all around building a naval empire. Maybe we're going to see British content. What else could we be seeing? Japanese content, I guess. They also, of course, had a big thing about the Navy. Maybe even Russian content, entirely because they were deeply concerned about access to warm ports and warm oceans, of course. So, yeah, I think that is going to be the first major expansion for the game in 2026. And then in Q3 and Q4, of course, you would get the art pack and whatever other immersion packs you can get there as well. This is amazing. I love it. I am so looking forward to this. This is what I wanted for a long time. I can only hope that in 2027... we will then be looking at the final military reworks leading towards land warfare. If they stick the landing in the Navy and they don't have to revisit it anymore because it is an amazing system, they can fully go all in on military warfare and finally make it fun. Now, beyond this, let's take a look at the economy. Make qualifications into a more impactful system and improve the logic and UI for building, hiring/firing to be more consistent and transparent. I think that this really does matter because they did try already to make qualifications more impactful. They kind of did with, for example, the guild system. But I think that you still need to do a lot more to make it so that you can be a reactionary backwards country and it can be beneficial politically, but economically, unless you have an infinite manpower pool, it will make it so that you cannot develop your economy sufficiently. The way that they do this is something that really matters to me personally, because what we currently see as well is a lot of shedding of people that are highly educated into the peasants, making the peasants a really malleable workforce. That's not how that works, right? The peasantry of the 19th century, just because maybe there were some people that came from the cities and then lived there, wouldn't be in a position where they essentially say, yes, I could literally work as an engineer if I was just offered a job. That's not true. They need to reform qualifications to be something that is more lasting, that makes you think twice about what kind of laws, what kind of institutions you pass. Frankly, I would even like to see a kind of overhaul of institutions to incorporate this as well, but that is surely not something for 2026. At least I would guess so. Let's talk about diplomacy. Rework the war exhaustion system from one where a single uncontrolled war goal can stalemate wars towards one where war goal control and war outcomes are more dynamic and interesting and much less frustrating. This is a big factor, and I have thought about this for quite some time because I thought at some point that I had hallucinations essentially, where I swear before the launch they said that I could drop a war goal and then force the rest of the war goals onto my enemy, and then you can't actually do this. I would guess that they did want to do this, but it produced too many edge cases, too many issues, and this is probably going to be how they bring it back. I'm really excited to see this. For diplomacy, I can really only say, obviously, when it comes to diplomatic plays, I would see a general overhaul as something that I would love, where the diplomatic plays are something very kind of dynamic. It should start as something very low, and if you rate it from like 0 to 10 escalation, at 3 escalation, you might have some skirmishes. Minor border rearrangements could happen, right? This kind of thing could take place, and then once you're at 6, 7 out of 10, you would be looking at potential full-out war, and then 10 out of 10, you can actually do a full mobilization. And from there, a war is much less, hey, here's one peace deal and that is it, but rather you negotiating your way from 10 out of 10 down to 0 out of 10. You can do this either by just fully capitulating or by going away where you say, hey, what we're going to do is I'm going to agree to certain peace agreements. I don't know, something like my army can only be X size. And for that, we pull it back to 7 out of 10. So like a Cold War where we're just sitting at the border. Potentially it could escalate and so on. That would be amazing. Am I confident that that is going to come in 2026? I don't think so. I do think, again, that the war exhaustion system deeply is connected to also reworking the diplomatic play system. But I would guess that reworking war exhaustion is kind of, if they have plans for diplomatic plays anyway, is kind of something that they are preparing or that they're leading into diplomatic plays being reworked in the future. My big hope, like I said, military in 2027, hopefully also something related to, of course, the topic of diplomatic plays. All of this has so much potential, but I understand they can't do all of it in 2026. Now, the other thing in diplomacy here is make declaring and holding on to diplomatic interests a more rewarding and challenging aspect of global empire building. I think, and I said this as well in the boats video, again, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but here we are. You need, of course, a lot of manpower, a lot of embassies, but also navy in the world to actually have your interests respected and to represent your interests. I think that that is incredibly important. And that leads us to a topic I think that the community has picked up now for ages, and that is the topic of tiered interests. I would love tiered interests. I think Generalist Gaming picked it up. I think everybody has talked about it at some point at this point. Tiered interests would make it so that I can't always fully commit. For example, sometimes I can't have all of my treaties in a zone because I'm not fully represented enough. If I only see this as periphery, I can't have you as my core alliance partner. It just isn't feasible. Simultaneously, it might mean that I cannot actually declare war where I can mobilize 1 trillion troops, because then maybe that brings domestic uproar. Maybe that brings domestic uproar. Maybe that means that I literally can't supply my troops over there, which brings us back to the supply topic, because I just don't have the network. I do not have the infrastructure. If you need to do more legwork to get tiered interests, and then you get more out of them, like waging bigger wars and such, amazing rework. And for this one, I don't have to say I don't think this is coming 2026. I think this is coming in 2026. So this was military, economy, and diplomacy, I think all of which look really good. And then we got internal politics, which I also think looks really good. Turn legitimacy into a more interesting mechanic where the strength of a government depends on their successes and failures. Highly legitimate governments can't simply be ousted at a whim, but have to be undermined first. Yes, thank you. I like that. Right now, you can switch government whenever you want to. It is essentially something that you have to roleplay. And if you don't have any systems other than in your head to do something, that is bad, because it means that you are falsely limiting yourselves. When you have a very successful government that is beloved by the people, getting rid of that government for whatever reason, even if all of a sudden there is a new majority, should have some ripples. This should take place, without a doubt. Simultaneously, legitimacy is something that you work for, something that you have to build on, and that is exactly what they're promising here. We seem to be looking at essentially quests for governments. They want to achieve certain things. I hope that they stick with the philosophy that they now had in certain journal entries, where they said even a partial success can exist. Obviously, if you can, go for the maximum. This to me looks like something internal politics turning legitimacy into more, right? Maybe we're looking at a United States of America DLC? Oh, we could be looking at... See, this again, to me it kind of sounds like Japan, because the major reformations are basically how you build legitimacy. Beyond this, maybe, I mean, I was gonna say France, but France already had a DLC, so you know what, it's not gonna be France. We could be looking at Italy, actually, maybe even Russia, because Russia also had certain politics of big attempts to reform, of big attempts to move forward, so this could literally and exactly be this. Look, I like this, they really see this there. I think internal politics in Victoria 3 is in a really good place, and this will make it ever better. Big fan. Other. Improve the way we simulate important historical conflicts such as the Opium Wars to make them play out closer to the way they did historically. What they mean here, I would guess, is that the Opium Wars didn't include 1 trillion British people landing in Beijing. Instead, it was a small force that secured harbors that blockaded essentially China, and from there it was only downhill for the Qing dynasty. This right here goes hand in hand with what I was saying with limited wars, which would make sense with tiered interests as well, right? We would be looking at something that really coalesces there, and then simultaneously, the Navy, it all kind of goes in there. I gotta tell you, I am confident that the goals that they have set for themselves here are achievable. I am also confident that I really like where they're going with these goals. The devil will, as always, be in the detail, and I will, of course, be talking about everything that they're working on there here on the channel to make sure that you are informed. But essentially, it sounds like we're getting Navy, like we're getting more diplomacy ever, integrated into the existing treaty system, of course, and then like they're even addressing some ways of internal politics as well. This seems to be the year of making the Navy matter, and I couldn't be happier. Folks, I'm going to leave you right here. I am very happy with this. If you are unhappy, if you were hoping that 2026 would bring something else, let me know in the comments. But for now, I will see you later, alligator.